So it was reported earlier this week that Mikey Henderson was he was arrested, or the warrant was out for his arrest, and implications with the issue with Trajan Bridges and Seth McGowan. So, and very quickly thereafter, Lincoln Riley officially dismissed Mikey Henderson for the team. So, what does that mean for the 2021 season? I've heard a lot of mixed reaction. I know that we've talked about this kid quite a bit. I even heard some reaction that some people think that this could potentially derail Oklahoma's season in terms of what they're capable of from a national championship perspective. I'm not one of those. Yeah, I think it hurts from a depth perspective, specifically if you think about that he might have moved back to the H-back position. But in terms of that, I think he was going to be probably the fourth-string running back, behind Eric Gray, behind Kennedy Brooks, behind Marcus Major. And then he was probably there along with Kevontre Bradford, the transfer from LSU, was probably there. Like I said, the depth, there was a little bit of depth concern on the H-back side, so we could have provided some depth there. So understanding, yeah, I think it hurts from a little bit from a depth perspective, but when you think about it, I mean, the kid had about 275, 280 yards of total offense. Yeah, I think he's a good, nice to have player. He can do a lot of things in the backfield, catch the ball out of the backfield. He could line up as a running back, line up as a wide receiver, or even a tight end on the end of the line. But let's not get a little bit too carried away in terms of this could derail Oklahoma's championship hopes. So, if I go on that school of thought, really thinking about that, and I heard that quite a bit, and it was a little shocking. So when I see that, it makes me think, okay, do we think that Oklahoma doesn't have the depth? Are we going back and looking at a problem? So if we're at a position with this team this year, if a fourth team running back, and this is no disrespect to him as a kid, hope he's able to kind of turn his life around, from this. But if Oklahoma's in a position where a fourth string running back is a cause for concern on the trajectory of the season, they're not as deep as I and many people think they are. So I don't think this is an impact at all from a championship perspective. Yes, it could hurt from a depth perspective towards the middle of the year when if you're missing some running backs because of injury or something like that.
Yeah, to take a balanced approach here, health is huge in the sport of football, of course. Championship teams are not just championship teams because they are the most talented or the best coached or had the luckiest breaks. Part of that might be the health of the team. Typically, you need to keep the right people on the field and then have the depth that you speak of to supplement where you get nicked up throughout the season. But I think people might be surprised if they went through every national championship team, and even to extend that to the elite, to the playoff teams each season, and listed out everyone who was injured that season and missed at the point that they got hurt the rest of the season. Jalen Waddle comes to mind for Alabama, for example. You're talking about one of the best wide receivers in college football, a first-round NFL draft selection. He got hurt mid-season last year, missed the rest of the season, played a little bit in the national championship game, wasn't really a factor, just came back to get on the field and catch a couple passes. Alabama won the national championship, and he wasn't the only guy that they missed throughout the course of the season. Ohio State made it to the national championship game, and they had injuries all over the place to various degrees. So, yes, injuries are extremely important. I was a bit surprised when that was the first line that came out of your mouth about a number of sources being that concerned based on our conversations. I don't pretend to be an expert on Mikey Henderson's abilities or how he will fit into the offense at Oklahoma, but based on our conversations and then also doing a little bit of legwork past that, I know that Oklahoma fans were excited to see him utilized in the offense, but he's not the workhorse type. He's a complementary type piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you were talking about that injuries, the first situation that was really coming to mind, and I can't remember the year when JT Barrett went down, was it before. It was the week before the conference championship game, right? Was it the Michigan game? And then, Cardale Jones, takes them to a national championship. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's
a third string quarterback who had never thrown a pass in college
right.
football is playing in the conference championship game.
Right. So, yeah, so it happens. Like I said, it was a little weird kind of seeing some of that. And there was a little bit of, obviously there was a lot of discussion back and forth, but it was interesting to see that commentary, which certainly I don't think, like I said, depth might cause a concern, but
there were a couple comments which are apropos based on the Mikey Henderson news, just conjecturing who could fill that role, who could be that kind of player for Oklahoma in his absence.
I think they're going to need Covontre Bradford to be ready. I think he's the guy that number one that I would think about. Another guy that's been talked about. We talked about after the spring game. There's always a kid that seems to impress a little bit each year, but really never kind of sees the field. A guy like Jaden Knowles, who's a walk-on, is a kid that played really well. He's actually played pretty well in the last couple of spring games through his career. Played well this year in spot duty. He's a guy. Should Oklahoma get into an injury situation, to your point, Mark, as a guy that might play a little bit more. I think this. We talked about the depth. If he was to move over to H-back, they just don't have a lot. I mean, honestly, they don't have a lot of numbers at that H-back position. I'd mentioned, if they go deep, they've got Braden Willis, they got Austin Stogner, and they got Jeremiah Hall that all can kind of, mix and match based on the formation, could play that role from a tight end H-back perspective. Jackson Sumlin is a kid that's probably going to have to be counted on a little bit more, maybe to supply some of that depth. Another kid that played really well in the spring. So those are the two kids. Jaden Knowles and Jackson Sumlin would be two of the kids that I think would have a little bit more of an opportunity now that Mikey Henderson is not on the team.